Hello, my name is Jim Robb, and I'm the president of the National Training and Simulation Association, otherwise known as NTSA. For those new to NTSA, we're a nonprofit association dedicated to facilitating dialogue between government, industry, and academia on topics related to the best possible training and training systems to be provided to our warfighters and first responders. We host a portfolio of 9 events each year, the last of which is called IITSEC. It's the largest training and simulation conference of its kind in the world. We've been running the CMSP programs for the 9, 10 years that I've been here and before that. And we established sort of a plateau. And so it was my charge to Carol Dwyer, who is our CMSP on staff host, that we established a committee. She did a great job putting together a committee. It was led by Ivar Oswald, focused on revamping the CMSP program and trying to give it a redo, as it were. So they developed a team and a strategic plan and then a committee structure to build a CMSP 3.0. This revitalized program will be launched at ITSEC this year at the conference. And a lot of work has been ongoing for the last 18 months to include recertification of the exam and a lot of committee structure to try to increase awareness of the CMSP idea and to promote it. So we will be doing a lot of CMSP at ITSEC this year, and hopefully you all will be able to partake and get interested in it. And I thank all those who participate in the process, and I think this new program is going to be a great success. It's really critical that we identify the best-in-class modeling and simulation specialists and continue to develop the M&S workforce of the future. So we have a tremendous panel today, and following their opening remarks, our moderator will take on your questions, and you have the opportunity to provide questions through the system as well in real time. We have dedicated about an hour for this, and we'll like to maintain that timeline and respect for all those who are participating, and we know everybody's busy. So let me now introduce our panel. First, we have Mr. Steve Swenson. He's the Director for C4 ISR and Air and Missile Defense for BlueHalo. He will serve as our moderator for today's session. Mr. Swenson joined Aegis Technologies, which is now BlueHalo, and he is their Director of the Eastern Operations. He leads a high-performance team of engineers and scientists pushing the envelope of modeling simulation, machine learning, and DevOps. We really appreciate his participation today and leadership. Representing the warfighter is Major Larry Baca. He's the U.S. Army Functional Area 57 for simulation operations. His assignments include service in Germany, Afghanistan, Korea, and he currently serves at the Simulation and Modeling Officer at the Maneuver Battle Lab in Fort Benning, Georgia. Representing the government civilian workforce is Mr. Christopher Willis. He's the Deputy Director of the Maneuver Battle Lab in the Maneuvering Capabilities Development Integration Directorate, as a mouthful, at Fort Benning as well. He has led virtual and constructive experimentation, both locally and in distributed ops, through the Battle Lab simulation collaboration environment. Representing academia is Mr. Brian Goldiez. He's the program manager in Orlando for the Virginia Modeling Simulation Analysis Center at Old Dominion University. He is an Orlando-based program manager for ODU's Simulation Center. He has over 40 years of experience in the M&S business, covering government, industry, and academia. Next, we have Ms. Lindsey Spalding, also representing academia, and she is the STEM director for the National Center for Simulation. She is a certified STEM professional who works collaboratively with many sectors and with NTSA to help to build strong STEM literacy and practice across diverse communities. She's really been a great person to work for with all the STEM things that we do throughout the year and at INSIC. Representing industry is Mr. Tom Janishik. He's a site manager, modeling and simulation branch at Fort Benning. He is a retired Army artilleryman and currently serves as the SAIC site manager of the simulation branch of the Maneuver Battle Lab. Lastly, we have Dr. Andreas Tolt, who's the chief scientist for complex systems modeling at the MITRE Corporation. In addition to his position at the MITRE Corporation, he also serves as on the faculty of the Old Dominion University. He's published 14 books, including one on the profession of modeling and simulation. So this is a high-powered group, and I thank them all for participating. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Steve to run the rest of the program.
I can find my muted. Thank you, Admiral. Yeah, I agree. This is a great group of folks who have deep knowledge of not only the modeling and simulation discipline, but also the certified M&S certification process and program. And thanks again for joining us today. I'm going to ask each of you from your perspectives, and as the Admiral introduced you, it's clear that you're coming from different directions, whether program manager, technologist, you're in the military, you work for the government all your life, you've been in industry or academia. Just take a few minutes each, and I'm going to call you out by name. Take a few minutes each. We'll start with Tom, because he's in my upper left-hand corner of my screen. And we'll start with Tom, and just tell us where you're coming from with respect to the CMSP. Tom.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Tom Janishik. I studied for and passed my CMSP certification in November of 2011. So it was the first generation exam. And at the time, I did it for both professional development and to set an example within my workforce. Currently at the modeling and sim branch of the Maneuver Battle Lab, there's approximately 46 personnel on the contract that vary from network administrators, info assurance personnel, software developers, and we all come together to support Army maneuver focused experimentation. And so as part of my professional development, I took the exam and took about 6 weeks between completing the application, studying for the exam, and then finally taking the exam. Part of that was gathering the resources, studying, and reviewing the slides from the ITSIC boot camp that I had attended 2 years previous to taking the exam. So I thought that was very valuable to prep for it. Both my company and the government organization that I support on the contract were big advocates for taking the exam and thought the credential reflected well both on the company and the Maneuver Battle Lab. I would certainly do it again and encourage my employees to do it. Currently have one person on the contract that took their certification about 6 months ago, and one is in the application process now, and she'll be taking the exam we expect in December. And so from a practical sense, I see it as a discriminator within the workforce, especially in the hiring process. I've encouraged those employees to take it because, one, within promotions locally, and then if they look to transfer out, it sets a baseline credential that they have that's recognized throughout the modeling and sim world. On a personal note, what it did for me was it got me a solid foundation. My first job in retirement was doing a pretty operational job doing live experimentation, and was moved over into the modeling and sim world honestly with no experience. And so, as a retired artilleryman and foreign area officer doing maneuver focused modeling and simulation, what this did for me was made me study and get proficient in the fundamentals of modeling and simulation. But at the end, it became my credential. And so I am a big advocate and would encourage anyone experienced in the modeling and sim profession or new to it to seek the certification.
That's great, Tom. Thank you very, very much. All right, let's spin the wheel here. Andreas. Dr. Tolk, you're up.
I'm up. Good, yeah. My name is Andreas Tolk. As you can guess from my accent, I'm from Huntsville, Alabama originally. I came over the pond from Germany in 2002, early in 2002, right when we were in the process to launch the very first version of CMSP. And I joined the organization that Brian is in right now, the Virginia Modeling Analysis and Simulation Center, as one of their principal scientists. And it was part of my original task to help to develop the first set of questions to understand what are the main ideas and so on and so forth. We did come a very, very long way since then, as we developed within academia several curricula that are addressing modeling and simulation. Modeling and simulation is taught at ODU, at NPS, down in Orlando, and so on. And we have more and more interest within industry. And I'm a little bit between the chairs here. I'm introduced as an industry expert, but even if you look into my current employ, we are a little bit between government and industry as we are running federally funded research and development activities. So I expected that when I joined MITRE a couple of years ago now, that a lot of my colleagues are aware of the CMSP and use the CMSP, as our idea the whole time has been, and I stayed a certified modeling simulation professional for the whole time. So I have now 4 or 5 of the certificates from the renewal process. But we wanted to make this a certificate that is recognized in particular by industry to show people that you have somebody who is an expert in modeling and simulation. We may have been a little bit too focused on the military component, but I think that was not only natural in the beginning, because that was our main customer. In 20 years ago, modeling and simulation was driven by military applications and still is. We now have more and more people catching up. Medical simulation is in the spotlight of a lot of development. The medical community has live virtual constructive simulation as we do. I'm currently supporting the blast injury group to better understand how they can compose their models, bring them together. And guess what? They have the same questions that we already addressed 20 years ago within the military. What can be composed? What standards do we need? What are the computational principles that are guiding this? What do I have to know as a user to make things work? What do I have to know as a developer to make things work? And so I like the idea of this body of knowledge that is captured by the CMSP. And I also love that we are updating this every 10 years. We may think about having to update this a little bit faster, and maybe in closer collaboration with the professional societies. I'm thinking in particular about the ACM, SIGSIM, and the Society for Modeling and Simulation, SCS. And maybe use CISO to bring more support in from industry to learn better what exactly is needed. Because I still have the feelings that we may, in some sections, be a little bit too much of pie in the sky without communicating clearly what is the problem, what do we solve with this part of the body of knowledge. So I'm overall very positive regarding the CMSP. when I made a little question around in my innovation center, which is a center for modeling and analysis, at least a third of the people, after looking in detail into it, said this is something that our sponsor may actually be find useful. But 2/3 did not even know about it. So we may have to become a little bit louder.
Thank you, Andreas. How about you, Brian? You're on mute, Brian. There you go. Yeah, Brian, while you're getting that fixed, Major, want to tell us from your perspective? You look like you're not in an office building, or is maybe he frozen? Must be cold there. Renee, we seem to have lost Major Baca. Brian, are you back? How about you, Chris?
Yeah, hey, it's Chris. How you read me?
So why don't you go? Why don't you go?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hey, this is Chris Willis. I'm the Deputy Director of the Maneuver Battle Lab. So about 4 years ago, I was hired as the Modeling and Simulation Branch Chief for the Maneuver Battle Lab. Much like Tom, as a retired Army officer, I had a lot of experience in simulations for training. So live, virtual, constructive, that is bread and butter for an Army officer. Like Dr. Tolk said, we've kind of led the way in modeling simulation requirements for a long time. However, I was not real familiar with MS for experimentation, and that's what we do here. We do combat modeling for experimentation, both live and constructive simulations at the Maneuver Battle Lab. So I've got a STEM degree, but I did not have a lot of M&S technical expertise. So wanted to increase my technical expertise and technical knowledge of modeling simulation. So I did two things. First, I got a professional certificate from the University of Alabama, Huntsville. Kind of gave me a decent amount of technical and academic background in M&S. And then I studied for and took the CMSP, again, for a couple of reasons. One, so I had a better technical understanding. It really informed me a lot of areas of modeling simulation I was not familiar with. So medical, weather, digital engineering, et cetera. And then it also introduced me into some of the academic areas. Like, I'm looking at Dr. Tolk's book, Engineering Principles for Combat Modeling and Distributed Simulation, that I probably would not have even known about if I had not taken and studied for the CMSP. The other thing is for credibility, and so every time that we give a VIP briefing or a briefing here, we do mention that we have 4 CMSPs in our organization. That does increase the credibility of the Maneuver Battle Lab, and I feel it does give myself some credibility as the chief down here. I do use it as screening criteria or evaluation criteria when we're hiring folks. There aren't a ton out there, but if someone is, it definitely lends credence to their their resume. And we've got a real, here in the Maneuver Battle Lab, we've got a real push, a real effort to get as many of our folks CMSP certified. And as far as I know, it's the only certification for modeling simulation professionals out there. So we're going to rely on it heavily going forward. And subject to your questions, that's all I got.
Yeah, Chris, one question. So you're on the government side. Have you mentioned the technical folks in CMSP? Mm-hmm. Have there been any discussions in your area with contracting folks? and putting CMSP and so forth in solicitations?
It's funny. We've discussed that, and that's something that I'm going to look real hard at next year. We recompete our contract, and I will probably take a hard look at that, because there are certain certifications that go into the contract. C++, the different IA risk management framework requirements, IT certifications, and I hadn't really thought a lot about it, but as you bring it up, I think that makes a lot of sense to actually put that into our solicitation going forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Major, by the magic of the transporter beam, you have shown up at Tom's desk. You got a few words for us?
Yes, sir. Thanks. Major Larry Baca. I got my CMSP in June of 20. Prior to that, I did get my master's degree from the University of Central Florida in modeling and simulation. So from my perspective, I looked, we're doing this talent, talent retention in the Army, talent management. So you essentially interview for your next job with your prospective employer. So I looked at the CMSP as a discriminator. It's been in the Army Career Tracker as a milestone for majors and lieutenant colonels since I've been a 57, which is about 2013 timeframe is the first time that I've signed it. But I've never actually ran into a active duty service member that is CMSP qualified. And I know why, because currently I'm the only one in the Army that is CMSP qualified. So it makes sense now. But I really looked at it as a professional development tool going forward. I got my master's. Now I'm working at the Maneuver Battle Lab, more on the experimentation side, less on the training side, future force requirements. So how do I broaden my my knowledge base? And the CMSP, I think, is an excellent tool to actually broaden your base to the point where if I didn't know a specific attribute or something for the environment I'm trying to model, I at least now have a very in-depth resource list. I know now, where to go look for things and answer the questions that my supervisors have. So in that perspective, I think it's a very good tool to broaden that base set of knowledge. And then, like I said, I'm the only one, so I use that in the marketplace right now. I'm looking to PCS. So saying you're the only CMSP qualified active duty service member in the Army is a good sell point for those unicorn jobs like Track Monterey and Orlando and all of those ones that are kind of an oddity out there.
So Major Baca, what could the CMS community or the CMS folks put in your hands to help get the message out to the other majors and lieutenant colonels who haven't seen the light?
So I've already talked to the proponency. So this was advertised on the 57 Teams channel. So there should be some active duty folks that are attending today, and that was due to the broadcast. So I've had 6 or 8 people reach out to me asking more about the test and the procedure. So on my part, I think it's great right now that I can say I'm the only one, but I really would like to see a lot broader base in the community to have that. And then I think it would also open up the aperture for some of the folks to go over to the experimentation side of the house that we do in the Army and kind of get away from the training base, that's the primary function of a 57 is to do training. However, there's a critical experimentation component within the Army that needs to also be fully manned with very qualified people.
Thank you. Brian. Looks promising. Oh. Brian, I think your mute button doesn't like you. Oh, promising. Go talk, Brian.
Okay. I don't know if I don't have audio, but that's okay. But I was a charter member in 2002, And at the time, I spent 30 years at UCF at the Institute for Simulation and Training. And I was always a great believer in leading by example. So I said, let me join this thing and let that be an encouragement to other employees at the Institute to do that as part of their professional development. And I think it worked out. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But in terms of me, I spent 10 years working for Army and Navy as a civilian. And before that, I was in the aircraft industry and did a lot of simulation work. But most of my career was spent in the academic community. And that's where I ended my career at UCF, and I help Old Dominion here. I did participate in a book project that I thought was very intriguing. It was sponsored by the Air Force Academy. And Larry Rainey and David Cloud, and it was published, and it was modeling the simulation book, but believe it or not, totally unrelated to DoD. It was using M&S as a precursor to look at how to manage forest fires and undergrowth and things like that, different techniques that might be used. But a couple of points I want to make, and I'm picking up what other people have said, is that I reached out when I got the opportunity to present here. I reached out to several universities that have people in the have academics that are involved in DoD or other places, and those that answered told me two things that I think are significant takeaways. One is they really didn't know anything about it. A couple never heard of CMSP. The other thing is that one of the faculty at universities get graded on promotion on three things: teaching, research, and service. Where CMSP can make a really big input is if the government, DoD, NSF, anybody, would ask, what are the qualifications of your key personnel, and then put in parens. You don't have to require it. Membership in IEEE, Human Factor Society, CMSP, blah, blah, blah. I think it would go a long way, because one of the things that academics don't like is to take tests. And I don't think it's going to be very successful in the academic community if they have to take a test. Academics always tend to get, when they go up for a promotion, they get letters from other academics or other people, but that are not in their direct chain of command to endorse what they're doing. So just some suggestions. But I think it's a great thing. And I think it's great that NTSA is revitalizing it.
Thank you, Brian. Very helpful. Yeah, it's interesting that academics don't like to take tests, but they certainly like to give them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, speaking of tests, Lindsey. So Lindsey was our co-chair for a while, and so I left her for last because she's the one that's got the most chops in this. So Lindsey, give us a few words.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for that. I think I just come from a completely different perspective. So as director of STEM programs for the National Center for Simulation, I've been working since 2015 on helping to really put our workforce development initiative into action. How do we engage, our educators, high school, college, undergrads, get them educated on what CMSP. We're located in Central Florida, and it became evident to us that we needed this workforce development initiative to make sure we had qualified people to feed into our modeling, simulation, and training industry. And so what I've been working on since then is the National Center for Simulation created an industry accredited entry-level professional certification that we have over 600 entry-level professionals. And these are students graduating high school programs of emphasis in modeling and simulation. They're graduating technical school programs. And now we're really working with those undergrad programs And so they are, taking a comprehensive exam for our industry, showing us, then coming in to get these internships. And they're interested across our industry, some the military route, some the civilian route, some entertainment, energy, the healthcare. So I saw several questions, asking about the CMSP across industries. And that's one of the things we worked hard for this 3.0 is to come up with those core elements so that it does meet the needs across our academic, military, and civilian, practitioners. That's another whole webinar. I think there was a question in there what those core elements are. I think that would be a whole other element. But for us, really is a credentialing culture, I think, and parents now are wanting these certifications. High schools, colleges want these certifications for, our young generation. And so I'm out there working, with, our subject matter experts, the CMSPs as our guiding light. So I can go down and say, at the entry level, here's your goal, whether you are, in that military, you've got your own innovation, project going. There is a community out there that will support you, that appreciates you, that this credential could make you noteworthy in. And so I think from my perspective, I'm working really hard trying to help us with that initiative between our academic, our civilian, and our government to engage, them, let them know that we're out there. And now we've got all these entry-level modeling and simulation professionals. They're ready to move up into our CMSPs. Over.
Well, thank you very much, panel. I appreciate it. What wonderful insights you provided, and from each of your perspectives. And it's interesting to see how the touch points and how these ideas mesh across the communities that we embrace as modeling and simulation professionals. M&S is this very broad subject area, and I always liked it because it was broad and allowed me professionally to get into all sorts of different areas that I might not otherwise get into. One of the questions, or there's a thread of questions here, and I'm curious what y'all think about. Hey, I've got a master's of science in computer science and virtual whatever, or I have a Ph.D. Why would I? It's only even touched on it. Why would I even want to pursue CMSP?
I can talk
Go
to
ahead,
that.
Lindsey. Yeah.
I think when we, as a PhD candidate at FIT currently, as we do our research at our master's and our PhD level, I think we get really specified and specific into, our interests, what we're studying. And I think we heard actually from several of our panelists that are CMSPs, that it broadened their knowledge, and it expanded what they were thinking, what they knew about our industry, and then helped them to be able to apply what they learned through that process. So to me, it's an extra credential. And I think I heard several of our panelists say, in addition to that, it does show that we're a little bit more knowledgeable beyond just our specified area of research. So that's my opinion. Over.
Yeah, so Major, I'll ask you that question. You got your master's degree and then got the CMSP. What? And you touched on it. I want to pull on that thread a little bit.
Yeah. So, well, you get your master's and you don't stop, right? You don't stop learning. I mean, eventually I'll probably go get my doctorate at some point. It's probably not anywhere near because I've got a day job at this point. But the CMSP was an opportunity to expand my knowledge base, right? I still read, JDMS, other academic journals looking at modeling, trying to expand my knowledge base. And I think the CMSP is a good capture of that, right? So I haven't stopped. I haven't stopped at my master's. I've got a professional certification, and now, that's something I can speak to when I'm in an interview or if somebody wants to know where what I'm spouting comes from, you have an academic and a certified knowledge base to speak from.
And so you think about it in terms of here's the academic, the book learning, and now the CMSP actually bringing the rubber to the road, help you in practice, develop professionally, and even the ethical considerations as well.
Sure. I look at it like that, but I also look at it as a master's is not terribly specific. Like a PhD, you'd be specifying on one specific problem set, going towards your dissertation, essentially. The CMSP gives you a broader set. So even though I did a master's, which is generally broad, I didn't hit a lot of the multidisciplinary fields that the CMSP covers, right? So I've got a better understanding of a lot more of the background to the environment variables, if that makes sense, for some of the simulation environments that we work with.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so for you guys, we're involved in CMSP Genesis, right? To turn your scriptures back to the first book of Genesis. So, and Andreas, I think you mentioned it. It was very heavily military related. Were you thinking also about were you thinking about broader community? You mentioned medical and so forth. Was that in your mind? But also being from Huntsville, and were you also considerate of the international community? Did you have them in mind? And what can we be doing to improve those things? And Brian, I open that up to you because you said the same thing about that you were there in Genesis.
Yeah,
Andreas?
The driver was definitely, in my case, that we were just door to door with the United States Joint Forces Command at the time. And they were driving trainings, they were driving joint experimentation, they were looking into these new concepts, had a lot of money, a lot of computational power, and needed a lot of advice. And the CMSP definitely was focused to help to provide a certificate that would help organizations like Joint Forces Command to get good support, and knowing that they get good support without having to do a focused interview. Because if you have the CMSP, you show that you have this broad knowledge that is applicable. We did not at the time focus too much on other application domains, but we focused on core competencies. So understanding what is simulation, how is simulation and modeling related. When I build a model and I do this to provide a purposeful abstraction and simplification of a question, and now I want to apply this model in a different context, can I still do so, or do I have to change a lot of things? And these are lessons and knowledge pieces that are totally agnostic of the application domain. And we see this right now in being able to transfer a lot of lessons learned from the military and defense community to the medical community. A lot of what they are doing is directly benefiting from the experiences if you have this core knowledge. And so I think that is definitely something that needs to be focused on in the future as well within the CMSP, because it's like knowing statistics. You don't have to be an expert in creating the means to count light bulbs. You don't need an expert to count boats. You just need somebody who knows statistics, and having this, bringing the domain expert and the modeling simulation expert together is definitely something which I see being applicable in a lot of cases. And like Lindsey, I have been active within Virginia to help with the development of the high school curriculum that is taught within Virginia for students being interested in modeling simulation. And I was always focused that I made sure that the people do not learn a solution, but that they learn a method. Because if you learn the solution, you know this one point. If you learn the method, you can apply it on a much, much broader scale. And that was driven by the CMSP from the beginning. Brian?
Oh, Brian and then Tom.
All right, I'm off mute. In the early days, kind of like Andreas, I was a deputy director at the Institute for Simulation and Training, and we we believed, and I think it helped us be a discriminator in getting contracts and grants principally from the Army. And it sure didn't hurt us as time went on. But I will say also that organizationally, we broadened our scope, as you mentioned, in healthcare. And, the Society for Simulation in Healthcare certifies centers, not individuals. And there's a group called the Council for the Advancement of Science and Computing, which is university-led, which looks at ways to advance, in many ways, the science of modeling and simulation, but broadly across economics, environment, things like that. So, I guess what I'm saying is I continue and I will continue to be a supporter of CMSP, but there's a great big world out there that we need to be careful that we're not an island.
Tom, you had your hand up.
Yeah, one point I wanted to bring out that I don't think anybody's really touched on is the currency aspect of the CMSP, that in order to renew, you've got to maintain your currency through the professional units, professional development units, publishing, attending the conference or other venues. That's the other aspect that strengthens or reinforces the master's or the Ph.D. or other professional experience. One, you've sat for the exam. A, you've demonstrated that knowledge, but B, you've maintained your currency. It's just like anything, just because someone was a certified pilot 10 years ago or other professional certifications doesn't mean you want to throw them the keys and say, go ahead and execute the mission. So I think that's another critical aspect that strengthens a program. Over.
Excellent. I mean, and I'm fascinated too, and I think it's the right perspective, Andre. I think you touched on it. The fact that we want to teach someone to fish. We don't want to give them a fish. We want to teach someone to fish, and so teach those core competencies so that they can go out and fish for themselves. I'm interested, Lindsey, because Brian raised it, and the question about alienating certain communities and so forth. So you've got this broad perspective at the university. How can we ensure that CMSP doesn't alienate those other communities? What are your thoughts? Sorry, I'm talking with my hands a lot.
Well, I think we're doing it now. I mean, part of this engagement and educating our public and the people joining us today. But I think there's a lot of work, right? This isn't an instant solution. It's all of us continually being there, showcasing. We have a workforce development committee of 200 plus, members across academia, military and civilian. So I encourage, that we continue to build that network, and I think with the impact that modeling and simulation is just having on our daily lives, everybody's tools, everybody's engagement, that people are more aware. So when, I go out and I introduce, what we're doing, they're listening. But we definitely still have a lot of people out there that don't know we even exist, and so I am working across states, like Andre, with Virginia, and hoping, to spread more nationally, from our perspective. But I think it takes all of us, building our network, talking about it, asking, on the demand side, if we want that credential, as an industry, we ask you for it, when we're hiring. So I think, we continue to do what we're doing, and it's not one easy fix. It's going to continue, I think, to always be, our challenge.
Yeah, Brian, you want to add something to that? You're muted. There you go.
One of the things I found successful in the past is go where they go, whoever they are. I don't know if CMSP has a booth or a spokesperson at Moore's. I don't know if CMSP goes to the International Meeting for Simulation in Healthcare or supercomputing. Go where they go. And a lot of times you'll come back with new members, and you'll also learn something about what tickles somebody else's interest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Brian. And I think that has been that whole CMSP 3.0 initiative to introduce the refreshed, certification exam at ITSEC, and then start really going out there and making, the different communities aware.
Great. Hey, so pulling on this thread, here's an interesting one. I'm going to put Chris and Tom on the spot. So one of the questions is, so should a business development person think about getting certified in modeling and simulation? And I'm asking Chris, your customer. So these guys walk into your office. Tom, you're from the technology program side, and there you've got these folks going out and burning some shoe leather to get business for you. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's interesting to say that because I've got a business development guy or a team coming to see me next week. I would say, like many things, it depends. So it depends on their own level of expertise, right? So if you're not familiar with it and you're trying to provide a service to me, you would have a lot of credibility, almost instantaneous. I would know that you knew what you were talking about. So if I were in those shoes, specifically for M&S, I mainly work with the military industrial complex business development people. But some of them are very much into the M&S world. So if I was in the computer science or M&S part of that industry, I absolutely would think very hard about taking it over.
Tom, what say you?
Yeah, and I think in any profession, at the human level, when you misuse terminology or pretend to refer to concepts and you're using them incorrectly, it just casts a big light on you. If you hear a news announcer refer to an operation that the 1st Marine Division did, and the newscaster says soldiers from the 1st Marine Division, it jumps out at you. They really don't have an understanding, or they refer to the concepts wrong. It's the same way in business development in the sense that if you're replying to a request for a proposal and you're trying the cut and paste approach of your knowledge base to answer it, you can crush your own effort. And so it allows you to have that knowledge base to correctly write to or know where to seek better information, better proposal answers to what the customer needs. Over.
And I had a little interplay as a in the small business world, and our business developer said something which may be very true. Always said that's a big difference between a used car salesman and a simulation system salesman is that the used car salesman knows when he's lying to you. And so the CMSP may help to overcome this challenge a little bit.
That's the other side of that coin. Thank you. Hey, so Major Baca, FA 57, when you were preparing for CMSP, were there resources that you found particularly valuable to you, or courses, anything you read?
So some of my books left over from grad school were helpful. Dr. Tolk's book, I used that as well in preparation for the CMSP. I didn't spend a lot of time prepping. I did go over the CMSP slide decks that came out of ITSEC and try to get a feel for the course. But when I looked at the construct, I kind of went, there's no way I'm going to be able to cover all of these domains. And so I kind of jumped in, and I did mess up. What I should have done is I essentially clicked the test, and then I spent the next 5 or 6 days compiling source information during my test window, which I should have done prior to testing. And I would say that was probably the biggest lesson learned from me is get all your sources prior to execution, and then refine your search as you're going through the test. So everybody that's out there, don't do what I did. Get the sources first, because that was it was a good 5 or 6 days of 8 to 10 hours a day going through and trying to get all of the sources together, because the source list I think has 185 potential question sources. So it's not a it's not a menial task to collect those.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question is sort of, you guys might have a challenge answering it because you're all so young, in the primes of life, not a gray hair on your head. So for somebody who is mid-career, who doesn't yet have a CMSP, would you counsel them to maybe think about getting a CMSP? Because you're all just too young.
I would say yes. I just had a discussion with one of my colleagues who is a little bit more mature than I am. It's hard, but he is. We just talked about something like this, and he said that a friend of his is a cello player, and he is absolutely fantastic. He's leading in his profession, and he's practicing every day for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then when being asked why, he said, because I want to become better. And so it doesn't matter if you are 25, 35, 45, CMSP can make you better. And that's why I think it's, if you're interested in this field, you definitely, as the major just said, you are forced to look at the very, very broad spectrum of application. And it may even be that we may want to look into some focus possibilities that you get your CMSP without having to learn everything. If you are interested in medical simulation, you may not have to know about what the DARPA system did a couple of years ago. But overall, I think it's for every stage in life that you can still improve and maybe even help us to provide some feedback and get the CMSP better and tell us what really helped and what did not help.
Wisdom beyond your years, Andreas. Lindsey, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to add in, not everybody wants to be a PhD. And so, I would say to that person sitting there with that master's, to really think about that. And then they're not maybe interested in the growth through a PhD. But as Andreas said, there's very much that growth opportunity through the CMSP route. And so I would definitely, depending on that person's interest, if it is MS&T as their career, absolutely encourage them to move forward with a CMSP.
Yeah, I was gonna echo that and say, if I was counseling some, a mid-career or early career person, my point of view is that it's a very small price to pay to give it a try and to contribute to the field. And if it works out for you, keep at it. If it doesn't work out for you, no foul, no harm.
Very good. Let me ask you another question. And so we've been talking about, Major, you said it, get the resources up front. Andreas, you talk about competencies and so forth. So just real quickly, your top 2 areas, your top 2 competencies where you would go and seek out more information prior to taking to or in preparation for taking the CMSP test. Who's first? All right, go ahead, Chris. You're up.
Yeah, I'll jump on that real quick. So 2 areas that were new to me that I think I learned the most about were the medical field, and Dr. Tolkien talked about it a little bit more. That's really broadening, and there were several questions on there about the medical field that I needed to look into, and it makes a lot of sense. We, in the military, we use various training aids to simulate casualties, so it lends itself well to M&S. So I think that's one area. And the other was probably digital engineering. There was some questions on that I had not touched that in a long time, and so that would be my advice to anyone, is to go ahead and study those areas. And then just dovetailing what Larry Baca was saying, there is a suggested study list or resource list that comes with the CMSP. I thought that was recommended. I would almost say it's mandatory. Download all of those, find them all, like Larry said beforehand. You're going to need them all to pass the test. Over.
And I'll jump in there as someone who's been on the committee that has been working to improve the test. That is something they took to heart, is that those study materials, those links. And I think we had a question on how do we know what areas to collect information on prior to the test. So upon the launch of the new exam, there will be a study guide specifically to help guide those of you taking the exam. And so it should be a little more user-friendly, maybe a little less downloading, but I still do echo, be prepared with your resources before you take the exam. But it has been redesigned to be a little bit more user-friendly on that side.
Yeah, one of the topics, and it goes back to the core competency, that I really like people to better understand, is to use the big word, the epistemology of simulation, which in English means what the heck are we doing when we are applying a simulation system? How do we generate knowledge? When can we generate knowledge? And the other topic that I see, and the older I get, the more I love to reuse ideas of others, and I do not have to have them myself. But if you look at the cyber physical system world, for example, and swarms and unmanned systems, they all use perception that is a model. They all use simulation to find out what is the best way forward. And so all reinvent the wheel, because there is not a simulation expert on this team. And it's done by a computer engineer, and computer engineers are fantastic. I love what they're able to do, but they may not be the strongest when it comes to the conceptualization, which is the model, which is really the brain part of modeling and simulation. And so understanding what are the different domains where simulation knowledge is absolutely pivotal for success, including digital engineering, by the way. I do not understand how we talk about digital engineering and do not use the term digital twins, that everything we do is directly useful for us in a synthetic environment. That is something that I would like to see more, and where I would like people to understand, hey, they are doing, these are simulation experts. Hey, they are doing simulation. Data scientist is cool. Yeah, it's cool, but we breathe life into the data. So it's this kind of excitement that needs to be communicated.
I clicked the bad button. Sorry. So I'm going to give just real quickly, and then we're going to hand it back over to the Admiral. Real quickly, think one adjective, because Andreas is talking about epistemology. So one adjective when you think of CMSP. And I'm going to start, Lindsey.
Oh. Action.
Cool. Andreas.
Agile.
Nice. Chris.
Educated.
Excellent. Brian.
Muted.
Muted. What was your word, Brian?
Contemporary.
Very good. Tom.
Valid.
Major, last but certainly not least.
I just say professional. I know it's in the title, but
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. This has been a lively dialogue. Hope it was helpful to those who are listening. And if you have questions, you know where to send them and we'll get you answers. Admiral, back to you.
No, thanks, Steve, and a great panel. And it's a hard topic. It's all about education, a lot of Ph.D., a lot of smart people running around. So I remember when I took over, that was probably 10 years ago, I told Patrick, who was the guy at the time, I said, okay, I want to take the test. And I'm a fighter pilot. I just need to know the process and I need to know what's in this. And it was the beginning of my journey of frustration with that process. In other words, that the exam was very specific to the military. And my vision was a much broader modeling simulation kind of concept for the whole CMSP program. So we're heading in that direction. And I think, the new test is much more rounded in terms of the audience that's going to attend. We've addressed many of the issues. We're going to address demand signal, which is why and who needs it. We've worked on like 4 levels of the CMSP program. The first of which is the NCS high school level, and then we're going to build a pool of people who are going to go off into the CMSP formal process. So we're trying to draw from a bigger crowd. We're trying to NTSA is not. I mean, I'm. We don't own this. The modeling simulation community owns it, and so we're happy to partner with anybody in all different organizations to try to expand the reach of the whole thing, because it just needs to happen. And the more modeling simulation becomes a professional kind of activity in the real world, then the more there's going to be a demand signal for it. So we also need to codify the body of knowledge and make these resources available. I think the resource list that I saw was like 10 pages of paragraphs and papers that were from ITSIC. And I was just, okay, that's too hard for me. But it just goes to say that if I enjoy this process and can get engaged in it, then that's the desire I have. I don't want to put barriers to entry right at the front end. I want to bring people through this and have them enjoy it and have it make sense to them. So again, this is a journey. ITSIC will have a significant CMSP presence, and you'll see a lot of glitz. And I need these folks that are on the screen to continue to help us mold this. It is a work in progress, and if the folks online want to get involved, please send me a note, and I think that we'll be happy to make the committee bigger. So it's everybody's program. So thanks again for all of that. Our next webinar is going to be on the 10th, and it's going to be a preview of ITSIC, and so at 11 o'clock. So we encourage you to come. Just remember, ITSIC this year is in person, and so you don't have to bring your mute button, and we'll overcome that. And everything is lining up very positive with ITSIC right now, and the commandant are coming down, a whole host of people. So we're going to have a great crowd, and like TSIS, we're going to enjoy it a lot. So thanks again for attending, and we'll see you next time.